In the beginning, before the first star ignited its cosmic flame, before the concept of time carved its relentless path through existence, there dwelt in the pearl of unreality a singular consciousness. The most ancient texts, those written in languages that predate human speech, name this entity Anu, the One, the perfect pearl, the eternal diamond whose facets reflected all possibilities of existence. Picture, if you can, a being of such completeness that it contained within itself every conceivable aspect of reality. Joy and sorrow, creation and destruction, order and chaos, all resided within Anu's crystalline form in perfect equilibrium. For eons beyond counting, Anu existed in this state of absolute balance, contemplating itself, exploring the infinite complexities of its own nature. Yet perfection, by its very nature, cannot tolerate imperfection. And within Anu's flawless form, there echoed discordant notes, aspects of itself that clashed against its harmonious whole. These were the darker impulses, rage that burned without purpose, despair that knew no hope, terror that fed upon itself, destruction that negated creation. To Anu, these elements were like spots of rust upon polished silver, cracks in an otherwise flawless gem. The ancient Vijayarai texts, recovered from the ruins beneath Chaldeum, describe what followed as the Great Sundering, though mortal words fail to capture the magnitude of this primordial event. Anu, in its pursuit of perfect harmony, made a choice that would echo through all subsequent creation. With an act of will that shattered the very concept of unity, the One expelled from itself every aspect it deemed impure, every quality that disrupted its perfect order. These cast-off elements, the shadow to Anu's light, did not simply dissipate into the void. Instead, they coalesced with violent purpose, drawn together by their shared rejection, their mutual exile from perfection. What emerged from this cosmic refuse was an entity of terrible majesty and primal rage, Tathamet, the seven-headed dragon, whose very existence was an affront to everything Anu represented. Where Anu embodied crystalline order, Tathamet writhed with organic chaos. Where the One sought harmony, the dragon reveled in discord. Its 7 heads roared with 7 distinct voices of evil, each proclaiming its own dark dominion, yet all united in their hatred of the light that had cast them out. The realm in which these 2 primordial forces existed defied all laws of reality as mortals understand them. It was a place beyond place, a time before time, the womb of creation itself, where possibility and actuality merged and separated with each cosmic heartbeat. Here, in this arena of pure concept made manifest, Anu and Tathamet faced each other across the gulf of their mutual opposition. The battle between Anu and Tathamet was not merely a conflict. It was the first war, the template upon which all future conflicts would be modeled. Their clash sent ripples through the fabric of uncreation, each blow exchanged between them giving birth to new concepts. The first strike created the idea of violence. The first parry gave birth to defense. The first wound introduced the universe to the concept of suffering. For ages beyond mortal comprehension, this Titan's war raged. Anu's attacks were precise, calculated, each strike aimed at excising the chaos that Tathamet represented. The dragon's assaults were wild, furious, 7 heads striking from 7 angles with 7 different forms of malice. Neither could gain lasting advantage over the other. for they were perfectly matched, equal and opposite forces locked in an eternal dance of mutual annihilation. The Neztem petroglyphs, discovered in the deep desert of Aranok, contain what may be the oldest account of this battle. Written in a script that predates all known languages, they describe the cosmic devastation. Light and shadow twisted into spirals of mutual consumption. Order and chaos ground against each other like millstones, and between them, the seeds of reality were crushed into being. As their battle raged, something unprecedented began to occur. The violence of their conflict was creating tiny tears in the fabric of their reality. Through these minute ruptures, fragments of their power leaked out, crystallizing into the first particles of matter, the first wisps of energy that were neither purely Anu's order nor Tathamet's chaos, but something entirely new, something imperfect, yet viable. Both combatants sensed this change, this unintended creation born from their conflict. Some scholars of the ancient texts suggest that this realization drove them to even greater fury, each blaming the other for this corruption of their perfect opposition. Others propose that it was this very realization that led to their mutual destruction, that in the moment of understanding what their conflict was creating, both Anu and Tathamet struck with such desperate finality that neither could survive. The moment of their mutual annihilation is described in the chronicles of the Sin War as the fundamental fracture. Both Anu and Tathamet, locked in a final embrace of reciprocal destruction, struck simultaneously at each other's core essence. Anu's spear of perfect order pierced the heart that connected Tathamet's 7 heads, while the dragon's 7 maws closed upon the crystal heart of the one, each head tearing away a portion of that perfect light. The explosion that followed was not merely physical, it was conceptual, spiritual, a detonation that occurred across every possible level of existence. In that singular moment of mutual annihilation, the universe as mortals know it came into being. The death of perfection and ultimate chaos gave birth to imperfect reality, a cosmos where order and chaos could coexist in uneasy balance rather than mutual exclusion. From Anu's shattered form, its spine spinning through the newborn cosmos, arose the crystal arch, a structure of such beauty and perfection that even diminished as it was from Anu's full glory, no mortal eye could bear to look upon it directly. Around this arch, the high heavens coalesced, realm of light and sound and harmony, though a harmony that would never again achieve Anu's perfect pitch. From Tathamet's corpse, still burning with the fires of primal rage, festered the burning hells. The dragon's body became the foundation of that terrible realm, its flesh rotting into landscapes of torment, its blood boiling into seas of fire, its bones jutting up as mountains of despair. And from its 7 severed heads arose 7 distinct entities, each embodying a particular aspect of the evil that Tathamet had represented. These were the 7 evils, lords of damnation, whose very existence was both a reminder of the dragon's death and a continuation of its malevolent purpose. 3 heads had been dominant, and from these arose the prime evils. 4 had been lesser, and from these emerged the lesser evils. Together, they would inherit Tathamet's hatred of the light, its desire to corrupt and destroy all that descended from Anu's shattered perfection. At the site of the great battle, where Anu and Tathamet had died, there remained a scar upon reality itself, a realm called Pandemonium, where the laws of physics bent and twisted where chaos and order swirled in eternal conflict. And at the heart of Pandemonium rested the Eye of Anu, the Worldstone, a remnant of the One's perfect vision, containing within itself the power to create entire realities. In the sulphurous depths, where hope dies before it can draw breath, where the very air burns with the screams of the damned, the seven evils established their dominions. Each claimed a realm within the burning hells that reflected their particular nature, though the borders between these territories shifted constantly, grinding against each other in territorial disputes that mirrored their lords' eternal conflicts. The prime evils, born from Tathamet's three dominant heads, claimed supremacy over their lesser brethren. Their names would become curses upon mortal lips, invocations of humanity's deepest fears. Diabolos, as he is known in the most ancient tongues, is paradoxically both the youngest and perhaps the most cunning of the three brothers. Where his siblings often rely on brute force or complex manipulation, Diablo employs a more insidious approach. He is the artist of fear, the composer of nightmares, and the sculptor who shapes mortal terror into monuments of despair. Diablo's domain in the burning hells exemplifies his mastery over fear itself. The realm of terror exists as a vast emptiness, inhabited not by physical demons, but by phantoms and implications. The environment transforms to match each visitor's most profound terrors. Warriors terrified of suffocation discover themselves submerged in boundless seas of blood. Mothers haunted by maternal fears witness their offspring in perpetual agony, forever unreachable. Academics who dread losing their sanity experience their reasoning gradually corrupted, coherent thought dissolving into chaos. The scholar Visha Orus extracted intelligence from demons acquainted with this place. They described a desolate realm, nearly devoid of inhabitants. The atmosphere oscillates between creeping dread and sudden terror, transitioning from lurking darkness to shocking revelations. Merely glimpsing this domain reportedly drives any creature into irreversible, spiraling anguish. Torbilos, eldest of the three, according to some demonic genealogies, embodies destruction in all its forms. Many make the error of assuming Baal to be a simple brute, a cosmic vandal who breaks things for the sheer joy of breaking. This misconception has proven fatal to countless would-be demon hunters who expected to face a mindless destroyer and instead found themselves outmaneuvered by a tactical genius. At the heart of Baal's realm lies the Hellforge, the source of creation for the realm. It is one of the very few places that has been seen by living men. The forge is said to make weapons that are infused with the essence of the primes themselves. Dul Mephistos, widely acknowledged as the most intelligent and manipulative of the prime evils, rules over the emotion that has shaped more of human history than any other. If hell can be said to have a true architect of evil, it is Mephisto. Where his brothers might corrupt individuals or small groups, Mephisto orchestrates the downfall of entire civilizations, turning nation against nation, brother against brother, parent against child. Mephisto's domain functions as the unofficial seat of power within the burning hells. Within its borders, innumerable demons congregate in massive gatherings, organizing themselves into competing factions around philosophies that Mephisto secretly shapes. The realm's political structure remains in perpetual flux. Coalitions emerge only to collapse, plots develop and fail, conflicts ignite and extinguish, all orchestrated by their master's unseen manipulation. For the Lord of Hatred, these eternal struggles serve dual purposes: amusement and refinement of his craft on an infinite canvas. Scholars and sorcerers document this territory more extensively than any other hellish realm, noting its dense demonic population and status as Hell's center of power. Dark citadels and shadowed courts house these assembling demons, each structure nurturing the seeds of animosity. The factions continuously evolve, switching allegiances, inverting hierarchies, pursuing supremacy over their rivals, while Mephisto observes from above. The inevitable outcome delights him most: diplomatic tensions escalating into savage, unrestrained combat. When the Lord of Hatred manifests, he often appears as a skeletal figure hovering above the ground, wrapped in tattered robes that seem to be woven from the dying curses of 1,000,000 souls. His skull is elongated, almost equine, with eyes that burn with cold fire. But like all the evils, this is merely his preferred form. Mephisto can appear as anyone or anything that best serves to inspire hatred in those he seeks to corrupt. It is worth noting that Mephisto is father to two of Hell's most significant figures: Lucien, who founded the Triune and sought to corrupt humanity through false religion, and Lilith, whose rebellion against her father would ultimately lead to the creation of Sanctuary itself. That the Lord of Hatred's own offspring would turn against him is perhaps the greatest irony in Hell's long history, and possibly exactly what Mephisto intended all along. While the prime evils command the greatest power and respect within the burning hells, it would be a fatal error to underestimate their so-called lesser brethren. These four demons, born from Tathamet's subordinate heads, each embody aspects of evil that are no less dangerous for being more focused in scope. Known also as the Maggot King, Juriel governs the infliction of physical agony. Juriel's realm is the easiest and most understood realm because it closely resembles torture chambers made by men. The realm of pain is further described as being cavernous and filled with such devices as great machines to tiny mechanisms engineered to elicit agony beyond comprehension. Juriel is said to gain gratification from the torment of this place's populace, as other denizens of hell avoid this but staying ever so close to hear the screams. When Juriel manifests in physical form, he appears as a massive, maggot-like abomination, his pale flesh glistening with caustic secretions. His body is covered in chitinous plates and barbed protrusions, each one precisely placed to inflict maximum damage. He moves with surprising speed for his bulk, striking with claws that have been honed to penetrate any defense, to find the tender spots that even the most hardened warrior cannot protect. His methodology of corruption is perhaps the most direct among all the evils. Juriel breaks the body until the mind follows. Under his ministrations, even the strongest will eventually beg for any release, make any bargain, betray any principle, just to make the pain stop. Andariel, Juriel's counterpart in Hell's hierarchy, presides over psychological and emotional suffering. While her sibling destroys physical forms, she specializes in mental destruction. The Maiden of Anguish sustains herself on human despair, remorse, and self-hatred, growing strongest at the precise instant when a mortal abandons all hope. Her domain, the realm of agony, focuses on mental warfare through crushing guilt, overwhelming regret, and devastating self-contempt. Knowledge of this realm remains scarce, though some accounts suggest that souls broken by its relentless psychological torture eventually surrender themselves to Duriel's physical torments voluntarily. And Ariel herself appears as a grotesque parody of feminine beauty. From the waist up, she maintains the form of a woman, though her skin is pallid and her eyes burn with infernal fire. Her lower body is that of a massive spider, and from her back sprout additional arachnid legs that she uses to ensnare both the bodies and souls of her victims. This fusion of allure and horror is deliberate. And Ariel understands that the most effective anguish comes from the corruption of that which should be beautiful or comforting. Among the prime and lesser evils, Belial stands as the most enigmatic figure, for deception defines his very essence. His designation as Lord of Lies may itself be misdirection. Within his domain, the distinction between reality and illusion dissolves entirely, with existence itself shifting at his whim, ensuring nothing remains as it appears. The realm of lies initially manifests as an idyllic paradise, abundant with lush vegetation and earthly delights. Yet visitors must remember the master of this domain. As one progresses deeper, the trap reveals itself, though such realization comes far too late for escape. Garvos, a human who endured demonic possession, recounted his experiences. Appetizing fruits burst with parasites upon consumption. Corridors and grand stairs either circle back endlessly or terminate at precipices and barriers. Alluring women become ancient hags upon contact. Paradoxically, food appearing spoiled and foul-smelling often proves delicious. Solid barriers, chasms, and hideous figures frequently reveal themselves as mere phantoms. Last among the seven, but perhaps most relevant to mortal existence, stands Azmodan. The Lord of Sin governs not just one transgression, but all of them. Every vice, every excess, every moment when desire overwhelms wisdom. He is the most charismatic of all the evils, the most seductive, the one whose corruption feels least like corruption and most like liberation. Malzakam's texts describe Azmodan's realm of sin as the most heavily inhabited infernal domain, a territory where corrupted pleasures and miseries reach their ultimate extremes. Within this realm, every twisted desire finds limitless expression. Deeper examination exposes the domain's genuine horror. The gleaming palaces rise from foundations of bones belonging to those consumed by their excesses. The magnificent gardens draw their splendor from earth, enriched by souls who sacrificed all identity to chase satisfaction. The bustling marketplaces deal in more than material wares. They traffic in recollections, feelings, and fragments of being that, once surrendered, remain forever lost. Azmodan himself appears as a massive, corpulent demon, his bulk supported by spider-like legs that seem too delicate for his enormous weight. His body is covered in faces, the faces of all those who have fallen to sin under his influence, forever part of him, forever crying out in a mixture of ecstasy and agony. With the seven evils established in their infernal domains, and the angels of the high heavens born from the crystal arch, it was inevitable that these opposing forces would clash. The eternal conflict, as it came to be known, was not a war in any sense that mortals understand. It was a fundamental expression of the universe's divided nature, the continuation of Anu and Tathamet's primal battle through their descendants. The primary battlefield for this cosmic war was Pandemonium, that scarred realm where reality itself remained wounded from the primordial clash. Here, where the laws of physics bent and twisted, where a single step might carry you leagues or trap you in place for centuries, angels and demons fought for control of the Worldstone. The Worldstone itself defied easy description. Called the Eye of Anu, it was neither purely matter nor purely energy, but something that transcended both. Within its crystalline depths swirled the power of creation itself, the ability to forge new realities, to shape entire worlds according to the wielder's will. Both heaven and hell understood that whoever controlled the Worldstone would have the power to remake the universe in their own image. For eons beyond counting, the war raged. The forces of heaven, led by the Angiris Council, brought discipline, strategy, and unity of purpose to their campaigns. Their warriors fought in perfect formation, their battle hymns harmonizing into weapons of sonic destruction, their light burning away demonic corruption wherever it took root. The armies of hell, commanded by the seven evils, countered with raw fury, overwhelming numbers, and the willingness to employ any tactic, no matter how brutal or treacherous. Where heaven's forces maintained rigid discipline, hell's legions embraced chaos, each demon fighting not just the enemy, but often their own allies in displays of savage dominance. The tide of battle shifted countless times over the millennia. When heaven held the Worldstone, they would use its power to create weapons of pure light, fortifications that demon-kind could not breach, warriors of such might that entire legions of hell would flee before them. When hell seized control, they would corrupt these same creations, turning heaven's weapons against their makers, transforming fortifications into prisons for captured angels, twisting divine warriors into abominations that served the darkness. Yet for all the fury of their conflict, for all the countless warriors who fell on both sides, the eternal conflict never reached a conclusion. Neither side could achieve lasting victory. Heaven's greatest triumphs were inevitably followed by devastating defeats. Hell's most crushing victories soon gave way to roots and retreats. The war had become not just eternal, but cyclical, a cosmic wheel that turned endlessly, grinding both angels and demons beneath its weight. It was Mephisto who first began to suspect that the eternal conflict had become exactly that. Eternal, unchanging, ultimately pointless. His strategic mind, always seeking new angles of attack, new ways to corrupt and control, began to perceive that as long as the war remained a simple contest between heaven and hell, it would never end. The balance was too perfect, the opposition too complete. But what if, the Lord of Hatred mused, there existed a third force? What if something could be introduced that was neither purely of heaven nor purely of hell, something that might tip the scales in one direction or the other? This thought, once conceived, began to obsess Mephisto. He shared his musings with his brothers, and though Diablo and Baal were initially skeptical, they too began to see the potential in breaking the cosmic stalemate. Unknown to the prime evils, similar thoughts were occurring in the high heavens. Not among the Angiris Council, who remained committed to the traditional prosecution of the war, but among some of the lesser angels who'd grown weary of the endless conflict. These angels, led by one named Inarius, began to question whether the eternal conflict truly served any purpose, whether the constant warfare was worth the price in angelic lives. The creation of Sanctuary represents perhaps the most pivotal moment in the history of creation since the death of Anu and Tathamet. It was born not from the grand designs of the Anguirus Council or the schemes of the seven evils, but from the exhaustion and disillusionment of those who had grown weary of eternal war. Inarius, once a warrior of the heavenly host, had fought in countless battles across Pandemonium. He had seen brothers in arms cut down by demonic blades, had witnessed the corruption of angelic strongholds, had participated in victories that ultimately meant nothing as the wheel of war continued its inexorable turn. Over the millennia, a terrible thought had taken root in his consciousness. What if there was another way? This heretical thinking might have remained nothing more than private doubt, but Inarius was not alone in his disillusionment. Other angels whispered in the quiet moments between battles, spoke of their weariness, their growing belief that the eternal conflict was not a holy crusade, but a cosmic prison from which neither side could escape. Even more shocking, similar sentiments were emerging among the ranks of hell. Not among the seven evils, who remained committed to ultimate victory, but among lesser demons who had begun to question why they fought, why they died, why they were reborn only to fight and die again in an endless cycle of violence that achieved nothing. It was in Pandemonium, in one of those brief lulls when neither side held clear advantage, that the impossible occurred. A group of renegade angels encountered a band of disillusioned demons. By all rights, they should have immediately engaged in combat. Instead, perhaps exhausted by the very thought of yet another meaningless battle, they did something unprecedented. They talked. The conversation that followed would have been considered blasphemous by both heaven and hell. Angels and demons, speaking not as enemies but as fellow victims of an eternal war they no longer believed in. They shared their doubts, their fears, their growing conviction that there must be something beyond the endless conflict. From these clandestine meetings emerged an alliance that defied everything both sides believed about the nature of reality. Angels and demons, working together in secret, began to formulate a plan. They would steal the Worldstone, use its power to create a new realm, a place hidden from both heaven and hell, where they could exist without the constant pressure of eternal war. The theft of the Worldstone was a masterpiece of coordination between beings who had been mortal enemies for eons. Inarius, using his knowledge of heaven's battle strategies, led a false assault on a different front, drawing the attention of both the Anguirus Council and the Seven Evils. While the great powers were distracted, the renegades struck, seizing the Worldstone from Pandemonium and vanishing into the void between realities. What followed was an act of creation unprecedented since the formation of heaven and hell themselves. Using the Worldstone's power, Inarius and his fellow renegades began to craft a new world. Sanctuary, they called it, a place of refuge from the eternal war. But creating a world, they quickly discovered, was far more complex than any of them had anticipated. The very presence of angels and demons working together created unexpected resonances within the Worldstone. Their combined essences, filtered through the crystal's creative power, began to generate something entirely new. The world they created was neither the rigid perfection of heaven nor the chaotic corruption of hell, but something between, a realm where order and chaos existed in delicate balance, where light and shadow intermingled without trying to destroy each other. Inarius, as the primary architect of this new reality, shaped much of Sanctuary according to his vision. He created sweeping landscapes of breathtaking beauty, mountains that touched the sky, oceans that stretched beyond the horizon, forests where life bloomed in infinite variety. But his demonic allies also contributed, adding elements of wildness, of danger, of the unexpected that prevented Sanctuary from becoming merely another version of heaven's sterile perfection. Around the Worldstone, Inarius fashioned Mount Ariat, a great peak that would serve both as a protective shell for the crystal and as a reminder of what they had achieved. The mountain stood as a symbol of their defiance, their rejection of the eternal conflict, their hope for something better. Among the demons who had joined Inarius in his rebellion was one whose presence would prove more significant than any could have imagined. Lilith, daughter of Mephisto, had come to Sanctuary not out of war weariness, but out of a deeper, more complex motivation. Where others sought escape, she sought opportunity. Lilith was unique among demonkind. As the daughter of a prime evil, she had been raised in the heart of Hell's power structure, had witnessed firsthand the endless scheming and betrayal that characterized demonic existence. But she had also seen how that existence was ultimately hollow. Demons might gain power over each other, might rise in the hierarchy, might even challenge the seven evils themselves, but they remained trapped within Hell, defined entirely by their opposition to heaven. In Sanctuary, Lilith saw something different, potential unlimited by the rigid structures of heaven and hell. Here was a realm where new things could be created, where the future was not predetermined by ancient conflicts, where power might be gained through means other than eternal warfare. Her relationship with Inarius began as one of mutual respect between co-conspirators. Both were leaders among the renegades. Both had sacrificed everything they had known for the chance at something different. But as they worked together to shape Sanctuary, something unprecedented occurred. Attraction that transcended the supposed eternal enmity between angel and demon. Their union was more than physical. It was a metaphysical impossibility that somehow became possible within Sanctuary's unique environment. Angel and demon, light and shadow, order and chaos, joining in a way that should have resulted in mutual annihilation, but instead created something entirely new. From this impossible union came the first of the nephalem, Linarian, who would later take the name Rathma. His birth sent shockwaves through the small community of renegades. Here was a being that was neither angel nor demon, but something entirely other, something that contained elements of both, yet transcended the limitations of either. As word spread among the renegades of this miraculous birth, it sparked a revolution in thinking. If angel and demon could produce offspring, if these children could exist outside the rigid categories that had defined existence since the death of Anu and Tathamet, then perhaps the eternal conflict itself was based on a fundamental lie. More unions followed, some born of genuine affection, others from curiosity or ambition. Each pairing produced nephalem children, each unique, each possessing abilities that seemed to combine and amplify the powers of their parents. Where angels were beings of sound and light, where demons were creatures of shadow and flame, the nephalem could wield all these forces and more. But with the birth of the nephalem came fear. Some among the renegades looked upon these children with wonder, seeing in them the promise of a new future free from the conflicts of the past. Others, however, saw only abominations, unnatural beings whose very existence was an affront to the order of creation. The debate over the fate of the nephalem divided the renegade community. Some argued they should be cherished and protected, allowed to grow and discover the full extent of their potential. Others insisted they were too dangerous, that their power would eventually corrupt them, turn them into threats greater than either heaven or hell. Inarius himself was torn. On one hand, Rathma was his son, and despite his angelic nature's revulsion at the thought of offspring born from union with a demon, he felt a connection to the child. On the other hand, he feared what the nephalem might become, feared that their power might eventually challenge his own control over Sanctuary. It was during this time of debate and division that Lilith began to show her true nature. Where others saw the nephalem as curiosities or potential threats, she saw them as the ultimate opportunity. Here were beings with the potential to surpass both angels and demons, beings who could reshape not just Sanctuary, but potentially all of creation. And they were her children, bound to her by blood and birth. The tension over the nephalem's fate reached its breaking point when a faction among the renegades, led by several of Inarius's closest angelic allies, decided to take matters into their own hands. They began planning to eliminate the nephalem children, viewing their destruction as necessary to preserve Sanctuary's hidden status and prevent the creation of beings too powerful to control. When Lilith discovered this plot, something fundamental broke within her, or perhaps revealed itself for the first time. The maternal instinct, that drive to protect one's offspring at any cost, combined with her demonic nature in a terrifying fusion. What followed would be remembered as the Purge, though few who witnessed it survived to record its horrors. Lilith underwent a transformation that shocked even those who knew her demonic origins. Her beautiful form twisted into something monstrous, of tooth and claw, of spike and blade, as the ancient texts describe. But more terrifying than her physical transformation was the cold, calculated manner in which she hunted down the conspirators. She did not simply kill them. Lilith made examples of them, each death tailored to the victim's nature. The angel who preached that the nephalem were abominations found himself transformed into an abomination far worse. The demon who spoke of the danger the children posed discovered exactly how dangerous their mother could be. One by one, she eliminated not just those who had plotted against the nephalem, but anyone she even suspected might harbor such intentions. The carnage was absolute. In a single night of blood and terror, Lilith slaughtered every renegade save Inarius himself. When dawn broke over Sanctuary, the utopian community of angels and demons working in harmony had been reduced to a charnel house. Only Inarius, Lilith, and the nephalem children remained. Inarius, discovering the massacre, was horrified beyond measure. This was not the Sanctuary he had envisioned, not the peaceful refuge from eternal conflict. In Lilith's actions, he saw the same cycle of violence that they had supposedly left behind. Yet when he confronted her, she was unrepentant. "They would have killed our children," she stated simply. "I did what any mother would do." But Inarius saw deeper motives in her actions. With the other renegades dead, only he stood between Lilith and complete control over the nephalem. He began to understand that her vision for these children was not benign. She saw them as weapons, as tools to eventually wage war against both heaven and hell. The confrontation between Inarius and Lilith shook Sanctuary to its foundations. Angel and demon, former lovers, now bitter enemies, fought with powers that threatened to tear their nascent world apart. But Inarius held a crucial advantage. He had been the primary shaper of Sanctuary, and the realm still responded more readily to his will than to hers. He could not bring himself to kill her, whether from lingering affection or simple inability. The texts are unclear. Instead, he banished her, casting Lilith out of Sanctuary into the void between realms. But even as she faded from the world they had created together, her laughter echoed across the realm, a sound that promised this was not an ending, but merely a postponement. Alone now, except for the nephalem children, Inarius faced a terrible decision. He could not bring himself to kill them. They were, after all, innocent of their mother's crimes. But neither could he allow them to develop their full potential, to become the weapons Lilith had envisioned. He had seen what power could do when unchecked, had witnessed how even the best intentions could lead to massacre. And so Inarius turned to the Worldstone, the heart of Sanctuary itself. Through days of intense concentration, he altered its fundamental resonance. Where once it had hidden Sanctuary from heaven and hell, now it would serve an additional purpose. It would suppress the Nephilim's power, diminish their abilities with each passing generation. The first generation of Nephilim, Rathma, Bulkathos, and the others, retained much of their power, though even they felt the Worldstone's new influence limiting their abilities. But their children would be weaker, and their children's children weaker still, until eventually the descendants of the Nephilim would possess no supernatural powers at all. Thus were humans born, mortals in the truest sense, possessing neither the immortality of their angelic heritage nor the supernatural powers of their demonic bloodline. Inarius looked upon these diminished beings with satisfaction. They were safer this way, he told himself. Less likely to attract the attention of heaven or hell, less likely to become the weapons Lilith had envisioned. But in his fear of what the Nephilim might become, Inarius had made a crucial error. He had assumed that power came only from supernatural abilities, that without their divine heritage made manifest, humans would be harmless. He had not considered that mortality itself might forge a different kind of strength, that the very limitations he had imposed might drive humans to achievements that neither angel nor demon could imagine. For centuries uncounted, Sanctuary remained hidden from the greater cosmos. Inarius ruled over his creation with an increasingly iron hand, shaping human civilization according to his vision of order and peace. He walked among mortals in disguise, guiding their development, ensuring they never strayed too far from the path he had set for them. The first generation Nephilim, those who remembered the time before the Worldstone's alteration, gradually withdrew from human society. Some, like Rathma, found remote places where they could practice their diminished but still considerable powers. Others, like Bulkathos, wandered the edges of civilization, becoming the stuff of legend. They watched as their descendants multiplied and spread across Sanctuary, building cities and nations, completely unaware of their true heritage. Human civilization developed along lines that would have been familiar to neither heaven nor hell. Without immortality, humans were driven by an urgency unknown to eternal beings. They created art not for perfection, but for expression, built monuments not for eternity, but for remembrance, formed relationships not from cosmic design, but from choice and chance and fleeting emotion. It was inevitable that eventually, despite all of Inarius's precautions, sanctuary would be discovered. The eternal conflict had continued in the renegade's absence, neither heaven nor hell gaining lasting advantage. But both sides had noticed the loss of the Worldstone, and both had been searching for it across the vast reaches of existence. The discovery, when it came, was almost accidental. A demon, fleeing from a losing battle in Pandemonium, attempted a desperate dimensional shift to escape angelic pursuit. By pure chance, the random energies he unleashed intersected with Sanctuary's hidden frequency. For just a moment, the veil parted, and the demon caught a glimpse of a world that should not exist. The demon's report to his superiors was initially met with skepticism, a world hidden from the eternal conflict. Impossible. But when multiple reconnaissance missions confirmed not only Sanctuary's existence, but the presence of the stolen Worldstone and an entirely new form of life, humans, the revelation sent shockwaves through the hierarchy of hell. The prime evils convened in secret council. Here was something unprecedented, something that might finally break the stalemate of the eternal conflict. These humans, though apparently powerless, were still descendants of angels and demons. What latent potential might they possess? What weapons might they become if properly cultivated? "They are virgin soil," Mephisto observed, his strategic mind already calculating possibilities. Uncorrupted by either side, unaware of their true nature, they could be shaped, molded, turned to our purposes. "An army," Bale rumbled, "that heaven would never expect. Warriors who could walk in the light, yet serve the darkness." But it was Diablo who proposed the most insidious plan. "We must not invade," he cautioned. "That would alert heaven to Sanctuary's existence. Instead, we must corrupt from within, slowly, carefully, make them choose darkness of their own free will." Meanwhile, in the high heavens, similar discoveries were being made. Angelic scouts, investigating anomalies in the cosmic fabric, had detected signs of Sanctuary's existence. The Angiris Council debated fiercely over what should be done with this revelation. Imperius, Archangel of Valor, argued for immediate invasion, but Tyrael, Archangel of Justice, counseled caution. The nephalem chose neither their creation nor their nature. To destroy them for the circumstances of their birth would be unjust. The debate raged for what mortals would count as years. During this time, both heaven and hell began subtle infiltrations of Sanctuary. They could not act openly. The treaty that governed the eternal conflict forbade direct intervention in neutral territories. But both sides found ways to work within these constraints. The prime evil's plan to corrupt humanity began with the establishment of the Triune, a religion that seemed to offer mortals everything they desired: wisdom, power, and purpose. Its doctrine was carefully crafted to appeal to human nature, while slowly guiding converts toward demonic influence. The Triune worshipped three benevolent deities: Dialon, the spirit of determination; Mephis, the spirit of love; and Bala, the spirit of creation. These names and aspects were carefully chosen to hide their true nature. Dialon was Diablo, Mephis was Mephisto, and Bala was Baal. By presenting themselves as positive forces, the prime evils could infiltrate human society without triggering the protective instincts that outright demonic worship would provoke. The religion spread rapidly through Kyrgyzstan and beyond. Its temples offered healing to the sick, food to the hungry, knowledge to the curious. Its priests performed genuine miracles, channeling power that humans had no context to recognize as demonic. To the common people, the Triune seemed a force for good in the world. But beneath the benevolent facade, corruption spread like a cancer. Those who rose high in the Triune's hierarchy were gradually introduced to deeper mysteries. They learned that determination could become ruthlessness, that love could become obsession, that creation required destruction. Step by step, degree by degree, the faithful were led down a path that would ultimately result in their complete subservience to hell. The Triune's grand temple in the city of Kyrgyzstan became a center of power and influence. From there, high priests directed the faith's expansion, established new temples in distant lands, and slowly worked to position Triune members in places of political and economic power. Within a few generations, the Triune had become one of the most influential forces in human civilization. Inarius, still maintaining his hidden rule over Sanctuary, watched the Triune's growth with increasing alarm. He recognized the touch of hell in their miracles, saw through their deceptions to the corruption beneath. But he was trapped by his own deceptions. To act directly against the Triune would require revealing himself, potentially exposing Sanctuary to both heaven and hell. Instead, he chose to counter the Triune with a religion of his own. The Cathedral of Light preached a doctrine of order, discipline, and devotion to the prophet, Inarius himself, in mortal guise. Where the Triune offered immediate gratification and personal power, the cathedral promised salvation through submission to divine will. The two faiths began a shadow war for the souls of humanity. Cathedral inquisitors hunted suspected demon worshippers. Triune assassins eliminated prominent cathedral officials. Both sides performed miracles to demonstrate their divine mandate. The common people, caught between these competing powers, could only try to navigate the increasingly dangerous religious landscape. It was during this time that a young man named Anu and Tathamet would emerge, setting in motion events that would forever change the nature of Sanctuary and humanity itself. But to understand Uldisian's significance, we must first explore how Lilith engineered her return to the world she had helped create. Lilith's banishment had not been the end Inarius hoped for. In the void between realms, she had waited, planned, and watched. The demonic daughter of Mephisto possessed patience that rivaled her father's, and she knew that eventually an opportunity would arise for her return to Sanctuary. That opportunity came with the Sin War's escalation. The competing influences of the Triune and the Cathedral of Light had begun to weaken the barriers around Sanctuary. Each miracle performed, each divine intervention, created tiny fractures in the veil that separated the mortal realm from the greater cosmos. Lilith, ever watchful, sensed these weaknesses and began to work her way through them. Her return was not the dramatic invasion one might expect. Instead, she slipped back into Sanctuary like a shadow at twilight, taking the form of a beautiful noblewoman named Lilia. In this guise, she began to search for the key to her ultimate plan. A human with the latent nephalem potential strong enough to reawaken the power Inarius had suppressed. She found that key in Diablo, a simple farmer whose family had been destroyed by the conflict between the Triune and the Cathedral. His rage at both religions, his desire for the power to protect those he loved, and most importantly, the dormant nephalem heritage that burned stronger in him than in any mortal for generations. All of this made him the perfect instrument for Lilith's designs. Their meeting was no chance encounter. Lilith, as Lilia, orchestrated events to bring Uldisian into her orbit. She saved him from certain death, nursed him back to health, and slowly began to awaken the power within him. But she was careful never to push too hard, never to reveal her true nature. Instead, she let Uldisian believe that he was discovering these abilities on his own, that he was choosing his own path. Under her subtle guidance, Uldisian's power grew at an unprecedented rate. He learned to manipulate the energies that flowed through all living things, to heal injuries and inflict harm, to inspire others and awaken similar abilities in those around him. Most remarkably, he could free others from the influence of both the Triune and the Cathedral, showing them that they needed no gods or demons to grant them power, that the power had always been within them. Word of Uldisian's abilities spread like wildfire. Those who had suffered under the religious wars flocked to him. He called them the Ederem, those who have seen, and taught them to awaken their own nephalem heritage. What began as a small group of followers soon became a movement, then an army. Both the Triune and the Cathedral recognized the threat Uldisian represented. Here was someone who not only rejected both faiths, but actively undermined them, stealing their followers and exposing their manipulations. Worse, his very existence proved that humans were capable of far more than either religion had taught. The first to move against Uldisian was the Triune. They sent assassins, demons disguised as humans, and corrupted mages to eliminate him. But each attack only served to make Uldisian stronger. In defending himself and his followers, he pushed his abilities to new heights, developing powers that had not been seen since the first generation of Nephalem. It was during one such attack that Uldisian discovered the truth about the Triune, that they were not servants of benevolent gods, but of the prime evils themselves. This revelation shattered any remaining faith he might have had in established religion, and fueled his determination to free humanity from all divine influence. The war that followed saw Uldisian and his Ederem systematically destroying Triune temples across Sanctuary. Each victory swelled their ranks as more humans awakened to their Nephalem potential. The sight of mortals wielding powers that rivaled those of angels and demons sent shockwaves through both the Cathedral and what remained of the Triune. As Uldisian's power grew, so too did his questions about its source. The abilities he and his followers displayed went far beyond anything that could be explained by training or faith. In quiet moments, he wondered why humans possessed such potential, why it had been hidden, and what it might mean for the future of his people. It was Lilith who finally provided answers, though she revealed them in calculated doses. As Lilia, she spoke of ancient times when beings of great power walked Sanctuary, of a heritage stolen from humanity by those who feared what they might become. She painted Inarius and the Cathedral as the great suppressors of human potential, keeping mortals weak and subservient for their own ends. These half-truths served Lilith's purposes perfectly. They turned Uldyssian even more firmly against the cathedral, while hiding her own role in Sanctuary's creation and the more complex truths about the nephalem's origins. She needed Uldyssian powerful, but not so knowledgeable that he might see through her manipulations. But others were beginning to piece together the truth. Rathma, first of the Nephalem, had watched events unfold from his hidden sanctuary. He recognized his mother's hand in Uldyssian's rise and understood the catastrophic potential of her plans. If humanity's Nephalem powers were fully awakened, if they were turned against heaven and hell as Lilith intended, the resulting war would make the eternal conflict look like a skirmish. Rathma was not the only one who recognized the danger. In the high heavens, the Angiris Council watched with growing alarm as mortals displayed powers that should have been impossible. The debate over Sanctuary's fate, which had raged inconclusively for so long, suddenly took on new urgency. "They are weapons," Imperius declared. "Weapons being forged for use against us. We must strike now, before they grow too powerful to stop." But Tyrael still argued for restraint. "They are defending themselves against demonic corruption. Their power is used for protection, not aggression. We should not punish them for refusing to be slaves to hell." The argument might have continued indefinitely, but events in Sanctuary were moving too quickly for heavenly deliberation. Uldyssian had learned of something called the Worldstone, a mystical artifact that supposedly held the key to humanity's suppressed potential. If he could find and alter it, he could free all humans from the chains that bound their true nature. This knowledge had come from an unexpected source, Rathma himself. The first Nephalem had approached Uldyssian in secret, revealing truths that Lilith had hidden. He spoke of Sanctuary's creation, of the union between angels and demons that had given birth to the Nephalem, of Inarius's fear and Lilith's ambition. The revelation that Lilia was actually Lilith, that he had been manipulated by the very forces he sought to oppose, nearly broke Uldyssian, but it also freed him from her influence. He now understood that he was caught in a game played by beings far older and more powerful than he had imagined. But he also understood that as a Nephalem, as a human, he had the potential to change the rules of that game. With grim determination, Uldyssian set out to find the Worldstone. He would not be Lilith's weapon or Inarius's slave. He would free humanity to choose its own destiny, regardless of what angels, demons, or anyone else desired. The journey to Mount Arreat was fraught with peril. Both the Triune and the Cathedral sought to stop Uldyssian, understanding that his success would mean the end of their influence over humanity. Demons and angels alike moved against him, sometimes fighting each other in their eagerness to claim the prize of stopping the rogue Nephalem. But Uldyssian was no longer the simple farmer who had begun this journey. His powers had grown to match those of the first Nephalem, and his Edorim followers had developed formidable abilities of their own. They carved a path through all opposition, leaving destroyed temples and shattered armies in their wake. It was at the foot of Mount Arreat that Inarius finally revealed himself. The creator of Sanctuary, the architect of humanity's diminished state, appeared before Uldyssian in all his angelic glory. But where once such a sight might have inspired awe or terror, Uldyssian felt only anger. The battle between them shook the very foundations of Mount Arreat. Inarius wielded the power of an angel with millennia of experience. But Aldysian fought with the fury of humanity awakened, with the combined heritage of heaven and hell burning through mortal flesh. Their conflict was more than physical. It was a battle of ideologies, of visions for what humanity should become. As they fought, the veil between sanctuary and the greater cosmos began to tear. The enormous energies being unleashed acted as a beacon, drawing the attention of both heaven and hell. The Angeris Council, seeing their worst fears realized, mobilized the heavenly host for invasion. The seven evils, recognizing both opportunity and threat, marshaled their legions for war. The Sin War's climactic moment had arrived. As Aldysian and Inarius battled, portals began opening across Sanctuary. Angels descended from rifts of brilliant light. Demons poured from tears of shadow and flame. The eternal conflict had come to the mortal realm. But something unprecedented occurred. The Edirem, faced with invasion from both heaven and hell, did not cower or flee. They fought. Humans, wielding their awakened nephalem powers, engaged both angels and demons, proving that mortality's children could stand against either of their progenitor races. The battle raged across Sanctuary. Cities burned as demons rampaged through their streets. Mountains crumbled as angels unleashed their fury. And in the center of it all, atop Mount Ariat, Aldysian fought not just Inarius, but the weight of cosmic history itself. As the war consumed Sanctuary, Aldysian began to understand the true scope of what he had unleashed. In awakening humanity's nephalem potential, he had not freed them. He had made them the ultimate prize in the eternal conflict. Both heaven and hell now saw humans not as insignificant mortals, but as weapons that could tip the balance of their endless war. The realization came as he finally overcame Inarius, the angel lying defeated at his feet. But victory brought no satisfaction, only the hollow understanding that he had played into the hands of forces beyond his comprehension. Sanctuary was being torn apart by the very powers he had sought to defy. It was then that Aldysian made the choice that would define the future of humanity. He could feel the Worldstone's presence, its power calling to him. He could use it to make humanity supreme, to drive out both angels and demons, and claim sanctuary for mortals alone. He had the power. He had won the right. Instead, he chose sacrifice. Gathering every ounce of his nephalem power, Aldysian did something that neither heaven nor hell had anticipated. He used his connection to the Worldstone not to enhance humanity's power, but to create a barrier, a final, absolute separation between sanctuary and the cosmic forces that sought to control it. The effort required more than any single being could give. Aldysian poured not just his power, but his very existence into the working. His body began to discorporate, breaking down into pure energy that spread across sanctuary, like a protective shroud. "No more," he declared, his voice echoing across dimensions. "Humanity will choose its own path, free from angels, free from demons, free from any who would make us pawns in their wars." The explosion of power that followed drove both heavenly and hellish forces from sanctuary. Angels and demons alike found themselves expelled, the barriers around the mortal realm suddenly impenetrable. The Worldstone itself pulsed with new purpose, maintaining the seal that Aldysian had created with his sacrifice. In the aftermath, as the dust settled and the survivors surveyed the devastation, a profound change had come over Sanctuary. The Edurem retained some of their awakened abilities, though nowhere near the levels they had achieved under Uldisian's leadership. More importantly, they retained the knowledge of their true heritage, the understanding that they were neither heaven's servants nor hell's pawns, but beings with their own destiny to forge. The Sin War's end brought an uneasy peace to Sanctuary. Heaven and hell, blocked from direct intervention by Uldisian's sacrifice, were forced to accept a new status quo. The Angaris Council, after much debate, agreed to a pact proposed by Tyrael. Sanctuary would be left to develop on its own, free from direct angelic or demonic interference. But peace, in the cosmic sense, did not mean peace for humanity. The prime evils, though barred from entering Sanctuary themselves, had found ways to project their influence into the mortal realm. Dark cults arose, worshipping the demon lords and working to weaken the barriers that kept their masters at bay. It was during this time that 3 of the 7 evils, Diablo, Mephisto, and Baal, faced a rebellion within their own ranks. The lesser evils, led by Asmodan and Belial, had grown frustrated with the prime evil's obsession with Sanctuary. They argued that the eternal conflict was being neglected, that Hell's forces were being wasted on schemes to corrupt a single world when they should be marshalling for a final assault on heaven. The civil war that erupted in Hell, later known as the Dark Exile, saw the lesser evils unite against their superiors. Though the prime evils fought with terrible fury, destroying fully 1/3 of Hell's legions in the conflict, they were ultimately overcome. Weakened and bodiless, they were cast out of Hell, exiled to the one place the lesser evils knew they desired most, Sanctuary. The prime evils' arrival in Sanctuary, even in their weakened spiritual forms, had immediate and catastrophic effects. They possessed mortal hosts, spreading terror, hatred, and destruction wherever they went. Nations turned against each other in wars fueled by Mephisto's influence. Cities fell to madness and despair under Diablo's touch. Entire civilizations crumbled beneath Baal's destructive urges. Tyrael, watching from the high heavens, faced a terrible dilemma. The pact forbade direct angelic intervention, but the prime evil's presence in Sanctuary threatened to destroy humanity entirely. His solution was to work through mortal agents, creating an order that could hunt and contain the demon lords without violating the cosmic agreement. Thus were born the Haradrim, an order of mages drawn from various traditions and united in purpose. To them, Tyrael gifted 3 soulstones, crystals carved from the Worldstone itself, capable of imprisoning even a prime evil's essence. He charged them with a sacred duty: find the 3, trap them within the soulstones, and hide them where they could never again threaten humanity. The hunt that followed spanned decades. Led first by Tal Rasha, a mage of incredible power and unwavering dedication, the Haradrim tracked the prime evils across continents. They developed new forms of magic specifically designed to combat demonic influence, created weapons capable of harming beings of pure evil, and slowly learned the patterns and weaknesses of their prey. Mephisto was the first to fall. The Lord of Hatred had ensconced himself in the heart of Kejistan's religious community, corrupting faith leaders and turning temple against temple. The battle to capture him destroyed much of a major city and claimed the lives of many Haradrim. But ultimately they succeeded in trapping his essence within the Sapphire Soulstone. The captured soulstone was entrusted to the Zakarum faith, a young religion dedicated to the light and seemingly incorruptible in their devotion. The Zakarum built a great temple complex called Travancore to house and guard the soulstone, swearing eternal vigilance against the evil contained within. It would prove to be a catastrophic mistake, though none could have foreseen it at the time. The hunt for Baal and Diablo proved even more challenging. The two brothers, perhaps learning from Mephisto's capture, fled westward across the twin seas. They sowed destruction in their wake, possessing rulers to start wars, corrupting peaceful communities into centers of depravity, always staying one step ahead of their pursuers. It was in the desert wastes of Aranok that the Haradrim finally cornered Baal. The Lord of Destruction, true to his nature, chose to make his stand in the most inhospitable terrain possible. The battle that followed reshaped the very landscape, creating canyons where none had existed, turning solid rock to glass with the heat of magical fire. During the confrontation, disaster struck. Baal managed to shatter the amber soulstone meant to imprison him, leaving only fragments. The Haradrim faced a terrible choice: allow the Lord of Destruction to escape, or find another way to contain him. It was then that Tal Rasha made the ultimate sacrifice. Understanding that a human body could serve as a living prison, Tal Rasha volunteered to bind Baal's essence within himself, using the largest soulstone fragment as a focal point. The ritual was agonizing, merging the noble mage with the demon lord in an eternal struggle for control. His fellow Haradrim, with heavy hearts, sealed the possessed Tal Rasha within an ancient tomb, binding him with chains that could never break, ensuring that he would wrestle with Baal for all eternity. The loss of their leader was a devastating blow to the Haradrim, but under the leadership of Jared Kane, they pressed on. Diablo, now alone and pursued relentlessly, fled to the western lands of Kanduras. There, in a final desperate battle that claimed many more Haradrim lives, they succeeded in trapping the Lord of Terror within the Crimson Soulstone. Over the site of Diablo's imprisonment, the Haradrim constructed a great monastery, dedicating it to the eternal vigilance required to keep the Lord of Terror contained. The town of Tristram grew up around this monastery. Its people, living in the shadow of an evil they would eventually forget, was buried beneath their feet. With the prime evils imprisoned, Sanctuary entered a period of relative peace. The Haradrim, their primary mission complete, turned their attention to safeguarding the soulstones and preserving the knowledge needed to combat demonic influence. They established hidden libraries, trained new generations in the arcane arts, and maintained a network of agents watching for any signs of demonic corruption. But time, that great enemy of all mortal endeavors, began to take its toll. As decades turned to centuries, the immediate threat of the prime evils faded from living memory. The Haradrim's numbers dwindled as fewer young mages saw the need to join an order dedicated to fighting enemies that seemed more myth than reality. The Zakarum faith, guardians of Mephisto's soulstone, grew into one of the most powerful religions in the eastern lands. Their temple city of Travancore became a center of pilgrimage, learning, and political power. But unknown to the faithful, the Lord of Hatred had not been idle in his imprisonment. Mephisto's corruption seeped out slowly, like poison through a cracked vessel. It started small, a priest who became a bit too zealous in his interpretations of doctrine, a guardian who began hearing whispers that seemed to come from the light itself. Over generations, the corruption spread through the Zakarum hierarchy, so gradual and insidious that none noticed their holy mission being perverted into something darker. In Kandaras, the monastery over Diablo's prison fell into disuse as the Haradrim presence there weakened. The local rulers, the lords of House Leoric, maintained the buildings but had long forgotten their true purpose. The great cathedral became simply another religious site, its deep cellars sealed and forgotten. Baal remained trapped with Tal Rasha in the desert tomb, but even this prison showed signs of weakening. The magical bonds that held the possessed mage grew brittle with age. The spells of warding that hid the tomb's location began to fail. Desert nomads spoke in whispers of a voice calling from beneath the sands, promising power to any who would dig deep enough to find its source. During this time, humanity flourished in its ignorance. Great kingdoms rose and fell according to mortal ambitions rather than demonic influence. Art, science, and culture advanced as humans explored their potential within the limits Inarius had set so long ago. Few possessed any significant magical ability, and those who did were often viewed with suspicion, remnants of older fears about the corruption such power could bring. But in hell, the lesser evil's victory in the dark exile had not brought the unity they sought. Almost immediately after banishing the prime evils, Asmodan and Belial turned on each other. Each claimed supremacy over hell, and their conflict plunged the burning hells into civil war once again. This internal strife prevented hell from capitalizing on the prime evil's absence. Instead of mounting the great assault on heaven that the lesser evils had promised, demonic forces spent their strength fighting each other. Some demons even began to question whether the dark exile had been a mistake, whether the prime evil's focus on sanctuary had been wiser than it seemed. The peace that had lasted for generations came to an end in the small town of Tristram. King Leoric, ruler of Kandaras, had made the fateful decision to move his court to the town, seeing in the ancient monastery a symbol of the light's presence in his realm. He knew nothing of what lay beneath. Diablo, imprisoned for centuries, had been working tirelessly to weaken his bonds. The Lord of Terror's influence seeped upward through the monastery's foundations, touching the dreams of those who lived above. Archbishop Lazarus, advisor to the king and keeper of the cathedral, was the first to fall completely under Diablo's sway. Under demonic influence, Lazarus ventured into the sealed catacombs beneath the cathedral. There he found Diablo's soulstone and, in an act of supreme folly or calculated betrayal, shattered it. The Lord of Terror, freed from his crystalline prison but still weak from centuries of containment, needed a mortal host to fully manifest in sanctuary. His first attempt was King Leoric himself, but the monarch, for all his mortal frailties, possessed a will too strong for Diablo to fully control. The struggle between demon and king left Leoric mad, paranoid, seeing enemies in every shadow. His reign became a terror as he executed loyal subjects for imagined treasons, turning the prosperity of Kandaras into despair. When Leoric proved unsuitable, Diablo turned his attention to the king's younger son, Prince Albrecht. Children, with their unformed minds and malleable spirits, made ideal vessels for demonic possession. Lazarus, still acting as Diablo's agent, orchestrated the prince's kidnapping, delivering him to the demon lord in the depths beneath Tristram. The possession of Albrecht gave Diablo the foothold he needed. Using the child's body as a conduit, the Lord of Terror began to rebuild his strength and influence. The cathedral's catacombs twisted into a labyrinthine hell, populated by demons called forth from the burning hells and corrupted creatures drawn by the emanating evil. King Leoric's madness reached its peak with his son's disappearance. In his demon-touched insanity, he accused the townspeople of conspiracy, ordering mass executions. His own knights, led by the noble Lacdanan, were forced to kill their king to end his reign of terror. But death was not the end for Leoric. Diablo's power reanimated him as the Skeleton King, doomed to guard the passages leading to the Demon Lord's lair. Word of Tristram's plight spread, drawing heroes and adventurers seeking glory or redemption. Many ventured into the cathedral's depths. Few returned. Those who did spoke of horrors beyond imagination, of flaws that descended ever deeper into hellish realms where the architecture itself defied mortal understanding. Among those drawn to Tristram was a warrior whose name would become legend, though whether as hero or cautionary tale remains debated. This warrior, accompanied by a rogue and a sorcerer, succeeded where all others had failed. They fought through the legions of hell, defeated the corrupted Leoric, and finally confronted Diablo himself in the deepest sanctum of his hellish domain. The battle that followed shook the foundations of Tristram. The Lord of Terror, even possessing a mere child's body, wielded power that could shatter minds and rend souls. But the heroes persevered, ultimately striking down Diablo's physical form and freeing young Albrecht from possession, though the child died moments later, his body and spirit too damaged by the experience to survive. It was then that the warrior made a fateful decision. The soul stone that had contained Diablo lay shattered, but its largest fragment still held power. Believing that the only way to truly contain the Lord of Terror was to imprison him within a human soul strong enough to resist corruption, the warrior drove the soul stone shard into his own forehead. For a moment, it seemed the gambit had worked. The warrior emerged from the cathedral, claiming victory over the Lord of Terror. Tristram celebrated its liberation, unaware that their hero carried within him the seed of even greater darkness. The warrior's attempt to contain Diablo through sheer force of will was doomed from the start. The Lord of Terror had planned for this possibility, perhaps even orchestrated it. Within the warrior's soul, a battle raged between human will and demonic power, and slowly, inexorably, Diablo began to win. The transformation was gradual. At first, the warrior merely seemed troubled, plagued by nightmares and fits of rage. He left Tristram, claiming he needed to seek a way to destroy the demon within him permanently. But his journey eastward was marked by a trail of destruction. Towns he passed through fell to madness and violence. Dark creatures followed in his wake, drawn by the demonic power that increasingly radiated from him. By the time the warrior, now known as the Dark Wanderer, reached the eastern lands, little remained of his humanity. Diablo had almost complete control, using the Wanderer's body to pursue a grand design. The Lord of Terror sought to free his brothers and unite the three once more, this time with full knowledge of humanity's potential and the power that could be claimed in Sanctuary. The Dark Wanderer's journey led him first to Lut Golin, where Baal remained imprisoned with Tal Rasha. The tomb's location, hidden for centuries, was no barrier to one of the prime evils. In the ancient canyon, Diablo found the chamber where his brother wrestled eternally with the Haradrim mage. The confrontation that followed was both physical and spiritual. Tyrael himself manifested to stop Diablo from freeing Baal, but the combined might of the two prime evils proved too much even for an archangel. Tyrael was imprisoned in the same chamber, forced to watch helplessly as Diablo shattered Tal Rasha's bonds. The noble mage, finally freed from his centuries-long struggle, had only moments of peace before Baal fully consumed his body. Where once had stood one of humanity's greatest heroes, now stood the Lord of Destruction in physical form, ready to resume his reign of terror. Together, Diablo and Baal set their sights on Kurast, where Mephisto waited in his Zakarum prison. But the Lord of Hatred needed no rescue. His corruption of the Zakarum faith was complete. The highest levels of the church hierarchy were fully under his control, their devotion to the light twisted into service to hell. When his brothers arrived, Mephisto was ready, having used his corrupted servants to prepare a portal directly to hell itself. The reunion of the three was brief but significant. They had learned from their exile, understanding now that direct assault on heaven was not the path to victory. Instead, they would corrupt Sanctuary completely, turn humanity into their willing army, and use the Nephilem's latent power to tip the eternal conflict in Hell's favor permanently. As the prime evils enacted their dark reunion, new heroes arose to challenge them. These were not the legendary Nephalem of old, nor did they possess Eldissian's world-shaking power. They were mortals who had found strength in purpose, skill in adversity, and courage in the face of overwhelming darkness. A diverse band they were: Amazons from the southern jungles, necromancers who walked the line between life and death, barbarians from the northern steppes, paladins of the corrupted Zakarum faith seeking to redeem their order's honor, sorceresses who wielded the elements themselves, assassins trained to hunt corrupted mages, and druids who channeled nature's primal fury. These heroes, following the trail of destruction left by the Dark Wanderer, began to understand the scope of the threat facing Sanctuary. They freed Tristram from a new demonic occupation, learning from the last Haradrim, Deckard Cain, about the true nature of their enemies. They pursued the prime evils across continents, always one step behind, but slowly gaining ground. In the desert tomb, they arrived too late to prevent Baal's freedom, but managed to free Tyrael from his imprisonment. The Archangel, weakened but determined, provided crucial guidance for the battles ahead. He spoke of the Soul Stone's true nature, of the Haradrim's mission, and of the terrible price that might be required to stop the prime evils permanently. The heroes' pursuit led them to Kurast, where they witnessed firsthand the horror of Mephisto's corruption. The once holy city had become a nightmare of twisted faith, where zealots performed demonic rituals in the name of the light. Fighting through the corrupted Zakarum forces, the heroes eventually confronted Mephisto himself in the depths of his temple prison. The battle against the Lord of Hatred tested not just their physical prowess, but their mental fortitude. Mephisto's power turned ally against ally, dredged up old resentments, and transformed minor disagreements into murderous rage. Only by recognizing these manipulations for what they were, could the heroes maintain their unity long enough to strike down the eldest prime evil. But victory over Mephisto's physical form was only the beginning. The heroes learned that Diablo and Baal had already passed through a portal to hell itself, seeking to rally the demonic legions for a final assault on both Sanctuary and Heaven. Armed with Mephisto's Soulstone, proof that even a prime evil could be defeated, the heroes made a choice that few mortals had ever contemplated. They would pursue the demon lords into hell itself. The journey into the burning hells was a descent into madness made manifest. Here, in the realm where the seven evils held absolute dominion, reality itself bent to demonic will. The very air burned with sulfur and hatred. The ground shifted between flesh and stone, and the screams of the damned provided a constant symphony of suffering. The heroes fought through legions of demons, each more terrible than the last. They witnessed the forges where weapons of soul-destroying power were crafted, crossed rivers of boiling blood, and navigated labyrinths where the walls whispered promises of power in exchange for surrender. Every step forward required not just martial prowess, but iron will, for hell itself sought to corrupt them. At the heart of hell, in a sanctum of primordial evil, they finally confronted Diablo. The Lord of Terror had shed his mortal guise, revealing his true form, a towering monstrosity of scales and shadow, wreathed in flames of fear itself. The battle that followed tested every limit of mortal capability. Diablo wielded terror as both weapon and shield. The heroes faced not just physical attacks, but assaults on their very sanity. Each was forced to confront their deepest fears made manifest, to fight through paralysis of terror that threatened to leave them helpless before the demon lord's might. But perhaps their mortality itself provided strength. Having lived with fear all their lives, they had learned to act despite it, to find courage, not in fearlessness, but in facing fear itself. When Diablo finally fell, his death scream echoed across all planes of existence. The Lord of Terror was cast down in his own realm, his essence scattered to the cosmic winds. But even in victory, the heroes knew their task was not complete. Baal had fled during the battle, racing back to Sanctuary with a specific target in mind, the Worldstone itself. The chase that followed was desperate. Baal sought to corrupt the Worldstone as his brothers had corrupted humanity, to turn the artifact that had shaped Sanctuary into a tool of Hell's dominion. If he succeeded, the barriers between realms would shatter, allowing Hell's legions to pour into Sanctuary unchecked. Baal's path led to Mount Ariat, the sacred mountain that housed the Worldstone. The barbarian peoples who had guarded the mountain for generations fought valiantly against the Lord of Destruction's forces, but they were overwhelmed. Ancient defenses, maintained since the time of Bulkathos, fell before Baal's onslaught. The heroes arrived to find the mountain under siege, its defenders making a last, desperate stand. Fighting alongside the barbarians, they carved a path through the demonic army, pursuing Baal into the depths of Mount Ariat itself. In the Worldstone chamber, that sacred heart of Sanctuary's creation, they made their final stand against the last of the three. The battle against Baal in the Worldstone chamber was perhaps the most consequential conflict in Sanctuary's history. Here, where Inarius had once shaped the world itself, where Aldysian had made his great sacrifice, the Lord of Destruction sought to unmake everything mortals had built. Baal fought with the fury of cornered divinity. He summoned the very forces of destruction, earthquakes that threatened to bring the mountain down upon them. temporal distortions that aged warriors to dust in seconds, waves of pure entropy that unmade matter itself. The Worldstone pulsed with each attack, its crystalline surface beginning to show a spreading network of corruption. The heroes fought with everything they had learned, every skill they had mastered, every ounce of courage they could muster. When Baal finally fell, his essence dissipating into the ether, they believed they had won. The last of the prime evils was defeated, the threat to sanctuary ended. But Tyrael, manifesting in the chamber, revealed the terrible truth. Baal's corruption had already taken root in the Worldstone. Like a cancer, it spread through the crystal structure, and if left unchecked, it would eventually transform the artifact into a conduit for Hell's power. The corruption could not be cleansed, could not be reversed. There was only one option. The Worldstone must be destroyed, Tyrael pronounced, his voice heavy with the weight of this decision. The implications were staggering. The Worldstone had shaped Sanctuary, hidden it from the cosmic powers, regulated the nephalem potential in humanity. Without it, no one could predict what might happen. Would Sanctuary be exposed to invasion? Would humanity's suppressed power emerge uncontrolled? Would reality itself unravel? But the alternative, allowing Hell to corrupt the Worldstone completely, was worse. Tyrael, making perhaps the most difficult decision of his immortal existence, raised his sword, Eldruin. The blade, forged in the heart of heaven itself, was one of the few weapons capable of destroying an artifact of such power. The heroes were evacuated as Tyrael struck. The explosion that followed was visible across continents. Mount Ariat, that sacred peak that had stood since Sanctuary's creation, was shattered. Where once the mountain had risen, only a smoking crater remained. The Worldstone, the Eye of Anu, the artifact that had shaped the fate of angels, demons, and humans alike, was no more. The destruction of the Worldstone sent shockwaves through all planes of existence. In heaven, the Angiris Council met in emergency session, debating what this meant for the eternal conflict and for their pact regarding Sanctuary. In Hell, the remaining lesser evils sensed opportunity in the chaos, their civil war temporarily forgotten in the face of new possibilities. But it was in Sanctuary itself that the most profound changes began to manifest. Without the Worldstone's suppressing influence, the nephalem potential that had been dormant in humanity for millennia began to stir. Not in all humans, and not all at once, but here and there, individuals began to manifest abilities not seen since the days of Uldyssian. A child in Westmarch discovered she could heal wounds with a touch. A farmer in Kyrgyzstan found he could call rain to his drought-stricken fields. A soldier in Kandurus realized that his strength had grown beyond mortal limits. These were small manifestations at first, easily dismissed or hidden, but they were harbingers of a greater awakening to come. The crater where Mount Ariat once stood became a festering wound in reality. The Worldstone's destruction had left the fabric of Sanctuary weakened, and through these weak points, demonic corruption seeped like pus from an infected wound. The region became known as the Dreadlands, a place where the natural laws broke down, where demons could manifest more easily, where the very environment became hostile to mortal life. 20 years passed. A generation grew up in a world without the Worldstone. though most knew nothing of the cosmic artifact that had once shaped their reality. The stories of the heroes who had defeated the prime evils became legends, told around campfires and in taverns, growing with each telling until the truth was almost lost beneath embellishment. It was during this time of relative peace that Diablo enacted his ultimate gambit. The Lord of Terror's essence, scattered by his defeat in hell, had not been destroyed. Death, for beings of such primordial evil, was merely an inconvenience. But Diablo had learned from his previous defeats. He would not make the same mistakes again. Unknown to the heroes who had sacrificed so much to defeat them, the prime evil's essences had been gathered by agents working toward a dark purpose. Adria, a witch who had aided the heroes in their fight against Diablo in Tristram, had been playing a longer game than any suspected. She was a servant of Diablo, had been even then working to ensure not just his return, but his ultimate victory. The key to Diablo's plan lay in an artifact that should never have existed, the Black Soulstone. Created by the Haradrim mage Zoltan Kula before his corruption and death, this ebon crystal possessed powers far beyond the original Soulstones. Where they could trap a single demon or angel, the Black Soulstone could contain multiple essences, binding them together into a single unified power. Kula had been killed by his fellow Haradrim when they discovered his dark researches, his body dismembered and scattered to prevent resurrection. But death had not ended his ambitions. His spirit lingered, waiting for someone clever enough and desperate enough to seek out his knowledge. Adria had been that someone. Following clues left across decades, she had tracked down Kula's research, learned the secrets of the Black Soulstone's creation, and set about gathering the scattered essences of the seven evils. The lesser evils, Belial and Azmodan, still maintained physical forms, still ruled their realms in hell. But the prime evils and their lesser siblings, Andariel and Duriel, existed only as dispersed essence, waiting to be gathered. Into the Black Soulstone, Adria bound these essences one by one. She worked in shadow, her true allegiance hidden even from those who thought they knew her well. But the Black Soulstone required more than just demonic essence. It needed a host capable of channeling the combined power of all seven evils without being instantly destroyed. For this, Diablo had prepared the perfect vessel, his own daughter. As Adria enacted her dark conspiracy, a new generation of heroes arose. But these were not mere mortals like their predecessors. These were true nephalem, humans in whom the destruction of the Worldstone had awakened tremendous potential. Their powers manifested in different ways. Some commanded magic that could reshape reality. Others possessed physical might that could shatter mountains. Still others walked between life and death as easily as crossing a room. Among these new heroes, one stood out, a nephalem whose power grew at an unprecedented rate, whose potential seemed limitless. This hero, drawn into conflict by an attack on New Tristram, would become the pivotal figure in the battles to come. The attack on New Tristram was no random demonic incursion. It was orchestrated to draw out those with nephalem potential, to test the powers that were awakening in humanity. The heroes' defense of the town, their ability to stand against demons that should have been beyond any mortal's capability, marked them as the one Adria had been searching for, though not for the reasons the hero believed. Deckard Cain, last of the Haradrim, recognized the significance of what was happening. He had spent the years since the Worldstone's destruction researching, preparing, understanding that the awakening of humanity's nephalem potential would draw the attention of both heaven and hell. His knowledge would prove crucial in the battles to come, though he would not live to see their conclusion. The hunt for the lesser evils began with Belial, the Lord of Lies, who had hidden himself in the city of Chaldeum. The desert jewel had become a place of intrigue and deception, where nothing was as it seemed. Belial had impersonated the young Emperor Hakan and taken his form, ruling the city while sowing chaos and mistrust among its people. The battle against Belial tested the Nephalem hero in ways previous conflicts had not. How do you fight an enemy who can be anyone, appear as anything, make lies seem like truth and truth seem like deception? The Lord of Lies turned allies against each other, made the hero question their own perceptions, created illusions within illusions until reality itself became uncertain. When Belial finally revealed his true form, a massive, grotesque thing of too many mouths speaking too many lies, the battle shook Chaldeum to its foundations. But the Nephalem prevailed, striking down the Lord of Lies and trapping his essence within the black soulstone that Adria carried. 1. With Belial's defeat, only Azmodan remained free among the 7 evils. The Lord of Sin, unlike his scheming brother, chose a direct approach. From the shattered crater of Mount Ariat, he launched an invasion of sanctuary that dwarfed any previous demonic incursion. Azmodan's strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. He knew that humanity's nephalem potential was awakening, that heroes would arise to challenge him. So he struck everywhere at once, forcing the defenders of Sanctuary to spread their forces thin. His demons poured from the Dreadlands in numbers that darkened the sky, each Sin Lord leading armies dedicated to different vices. The siege of Bastion's Keep, the last great fortress standing between Azmodan's forces and the heart of the mortal kingdoms, would be remembered as one of history's greatest battles. Here, mortal soldiers fought alongside awakening Nephalem. Ancient angelic weapons were unsealed for desperate use, and the very stones of the keep were sanctified with the blood of heroes. The Nephalem hero, now grown powerful beyond the dreams of previous generations, carved through Azmodan's legions like a scythe through wheat. Each victory, each demon slain, seemed to unlock greater potential within them. They were becoming what Uldisian had glimpsed, a being capable of standing against the lords of heaven and hell as an equal. In the heart of the Dreadlands, in a crater still smoking from the Worldstone's destruction, the final confrontation with Azmodan took place. The Lord of Sin had prepared for this battle, surrounding himself with the greatest champions of his realm, each embodying a different aspect of sinful excess. But the Nephalem would not be denied. They fought through the Sin Lords one by one. Gluttony, who consumed all in its path. Pride, whose arrogance was matched only by its power. Lust, who turned desire into weapon. And all the others. Each victory not only weakened Azmodan, but freed those mortal souls who had been enslaved to these particular vices. When at last the Lord of Sin himself fell, his massive form crumbling as his essence was drawn into the black soulstone, a terrible silence fell across the battlefield. The last of the 7 evils had been captured. Victory seemed complete. It was then that Adria revealed her true allegiance. Adria's betrayal was masterfully orchestrated. She had spent years gaining the trust of those who fought against hell, had aided in capturing the essences of the seven evils, had seemed the most dedicated to preventing their return. All of it had been in service to Diablo's ultimate plan. The vessel Diablo had chosen for his return was Leah, Adria's own daughter. But Leah was no ordinary mortal. She was the daughter of Prince Aidan, the warrior who had become the Dark Wanderer, who had carried Diablo's essence within him. Through this bloodline connection, Leah bore the potential to channel demonic power beyond any normal human's capacity. As Adria began the ritual to awaken the Black Soulstone's power, the terrible truth became clear. This had always been Diablo's plan. His defeat, his brother's defeats, even the capture of the lesser evils, all had been orchestrated to bring the essences of all seven evils together in one vessel, one stone, one being. The ritual transformed Leah, consuming her humanity as Diablo emerged not just restored, but transformed. He had absorbed the essences of all seven evils, becoming the prime evil, a singular embodiment of all hell's power. This was not merely Diablo returned. This was Diablo elevated to a level of power not seen since Tathamet itself. The prime evil's first act was to assault the high heavens directly. With the Worldstone destroyed and his power magnified sevenfold, Diablo could breach the barriers that had long protected the angelic realm. The silver spires of heaven, which had stood inviolate since creation, faced their greatest threat. The invasion of heaven was a sight that burned itself into the memory of all who witnessed it. Diablo, in his prime evil form, led legions of hell's greatest champions through rifts torn in reality itself. They poured into the crystal perfection of heaven like oil into pure water, corruption spreading wherever they tread. The angels, led by Imperius and the Angiras Council, fought with desperate valor, but they faced not just superior numbers, but the combined tactical genius of all seven evils united in one being. Diablo wielded Mephisto's strategic brilliance, Baal's destructive power, his own mastery of terror, and all the weapons of the lesser evils combined. The battle for the Diamond Gates, heaven's first and greatest defense, lasted days by mortal reckoning. Angels fell like burning stars, their light extinguished by demonic claws. Demons died by the thousands, their essence scattered by angelic blades. But slowly, inexorably, hell's forces pushed forward. When the Diamond Gates finally shattered, when Diablo himself strode into the courts of heaven, it seemed that the eternal conflict might finally end in hell's victory. The prime evil made his way toward the crystal arch itself, the source of all angelic life. If he could corrupt it, as Baal had tried to corrupt the Worldstone, all of creation would fall under hell's dominion. It was then that the nephalem hero arrived in heaven, having fought through hell's rear guard to pursue Diablo to this final battleground. What followed was a confrontation that shook the very foundations of existence. Mortal nephalem against the combined might of all seven evils. Humanity's potential against hell's primordial power. The battle raged across heaven's bleeding landscape. Diablo brought to bear every weapon in hell's arsenal. Mephisto's hatred turning angels against each other. Baal's destruction shattering heaven's perfect architecture. Belial's lies making reality uncertain, Asmodan's temptations offering power in exchange for surrender, Duriel's pain racking the Nephilim's mortal form, and Ariel's anguish dredging up every doubt and failure. But the Nephilim had something the prime evil, for all his power, could not truly understand, the strength that came from mortality itself. Where Diablo was ancient and set in his nature, the Nephilim could adapt, could grow, could become more than they were moment by moment. Where Diablo fought with the accumulated malice of eons, the Nephilim fought with the desperate hope of a mayfly that burns bright precisely because its time is limited. The climactic battle atop heaven's highest spire, with the crystal arch pulsing overhead and the fate of all creation hanging in the balance, would be remembered as the moment when humanity truly came into its inheritance. The Nephilim, battered and bloodied but unbroken, faced down the prime evil in all his terrible glory. Diablo had made one crucial error in his grand design. In absorbing all 7 evils, he had not just combined their power, he had also combined their weaknesses. The conflicts that had always existed between the 7, the rivalries and resentments, the competing visions of evil's ultimate victory, all warred within the prime evil's unified form. The Nephilim, whether through insight or instinct, exploited these fractures. Each attack was precisely aimed not just at Diablo, but at the contradictions within him. Terror and hatred could not fully align. One required victims to remain alive to fear, the other demanded destruction. Sin and lies conflicted. Sin reveled in truth of desire, while lies denied truth entirely. As the battle progressed, cracks began to appear in the prime evil's form, not physical, but spiritual, conceptual. The 7 essences that Diablo had forcibly unified began to strain against their bonds, each evil's nature reasserting itself against the forced unity. The killing blow, when it came, was delivered not through strength alone, but through understanding. The Nephilim struck at the heart of Diablo's great deception, the lie he had told even himself, that the 7 could truly become one, that the inherent chaos of evil could be forced into perfect unity. The prime evil form shattered, the 7 essences scattering like seeds on cosmic wind. Diablo's final scream echoed across all planes of existence, a sound of ultimate defeat and frustrated ambition. The Lord of Terror's perfect plan, centuries in the making, had been undone by a single mortal who embodied the potential that both heaven and hell had long feared. In the aftermath of the prime evil's defeat, a new dilemma arose. The essences of the 7 evils, though scattered, were not destroyed. As had been proven time and again, beings of such primordial evil could not be permanently killed, only contained, banished, or dispersed. The black soulstone, cracked but not shattered, still held traces of the evil's power. It had become a thing too dangerous to exist, too powerful to destroy. The Angiras Council, shaken by how close they had come to defeat, debated what should be done with this artifact of terrible potential. It was Malthael, the Archangel of Wisdom, who had been absent during Heaven's invasion, who proposed a solution. The Black Soulstone would be hidden, placed under the most powerful wards Heaven could devise, in a location known only to the Angiras Council. There it would remain, guarded but unused, a reminder of both Hell's ambition and Heaven's narrow escape. But Malthael had his own agenda. The invasion of Heaven, the sight of demons defiling the sacred realm, had broken something fundamental in the archangel of wisdom. He had gazed too deeply into the nature of existence, had seen how the eternal conflict would continue endlessly, how mortals with their nephalem potential represented a chaotic variable that threatened all cosmic order. In secret, Malthael began to formulate a final solution, not just to the demon threat, but to what he saw as the corruption that mortality itself represented. Malthael's transformation from wisdom to death represents perhaps the most tragic fall in heaven's history. Not corruption by demonic influence, but the logical endpoint of absolute order pursued without mercy. When the Worldstone shattered, the aspect of wisdom found himself unable to comprehend existence without that cosmic keystone. He who had once drawn all disparate viewpoints into perfect harmony could no longer hear the universe's song. His absence stretched across mortal decades. Some claimed he wandered the ruins of Pandemonium, searching for meaning in that primal scar. Others believed he meditated in dimensions beyond angelic understanding. When he finally returned, wisdom had curdled into something far more terrible than mere madness. It had become certainty. Malthael looked upon humanity and saw not potential, but paradox. These beings, born of angel and demon, carried within them the capacity for both absolute good and ultimate evil. Their growing nephalem powers meant they could one day rival heaven itself. But more troubling to his crystallized logic was their fundamental unpredictability. An angel would always choose virtue, a demon would always choose vice, but a human might choose either or both, or change their choice entirely. They were variables in an equation that demanded constants. His solution bore the cold elegance of mathematics. Remove the variable. If humanity ceased to exist, the eternal conflict would return to its original comprehensible form. Angels and demons would war in perfect balance, neither gaining lasting advantage, neither introducing chaotic elements that might tip the scales toward universal destruction. It was not genocide born of hatred. Malthael felt nothing so base as emotion. It was simply the optimal solution to an existential equation. The transformation reflected in his very being. Where once Malthael had appeared as luminous wisdom incarnate, he now manifested as death's inevitability. His wings became tattered shrouds, his radiance dimmed to the grey of ending. Most telling, the chalice of wisdom that had once shown infinite possibilities now revealed only one truth: all things must die. When he claimed the Black Soul Stone, his purpose achieved perfect clarity. He would not use it to become demonic, as others had. Instead, he would weaponize the seven evils' essence to achieve what they never could: the complete extinction of humanity. Every mortal death would fuel the ritual. Every soul consumed would bring him closer to his goal. The irony that an angel would use demonic power to commit an atrocity surpassing any evil's achievement was lost on him. Wisdom without compassion had become indistinguishable from evil itself. His reapers shared this perverted clarity. These were not corrupted angels, but beings who had looked upon Malthael's logic and found it unassailable. They moved through sanctuary with mechanical precision, draining souls with the dispassion of farmers harvesting wheat. Cities fell silent. Millions died in moments. The death toll mounted with such speed that corpses lay unburied in streets, the living too few to tend the dead. In this, Malthael revealed the fundamental danger of absolute order pursued without mercy. He had become what he sought to prevent, a force of such destruction that existence itself recoiled. His certainty left no room for doubt, for growth, for the beautiful chaos of mortal choice. In pursuing perfect order, he had become entropy incarnate, proving that wisdom severed from compassion inevitably becomes death. The final battle in Pandemonium, where creation began, saw the ultimate perversion of angelic purpose. Malthael wielded death not as transition but as ending, not as natural cycle but as artificial termination. When the nephalem hero struck him down, his shattering released the seven evils once more, but also freed wisdom from its self-imposed prison of certainty. In trying to save creation through order without mercy, he had only proven why such mercy was essential. Without it, even angels could fall farther than any demon. Yet Malthael's fall would prove but a prelude to darker days. The evils he released would not remain scattered for long. In the decades to follow, Sanctuary would witness horrors that made even the reaper's harvest seem merciful. The corruption of Inarius himself, the burning of the Cathedral of Light, and the rise of Lilith from her ancient prison. The children of Sanctuary would learn that neither heaven's wisdom nor hell's cunning held monopoly on destruction. When the daughter of hatred finally walked among her children once more, she would find a world already broken by those who claimed to save it. The seeds of that final reckoning were sown in Malthael's ashes, for his greatest sin was not the souls he reaped, but the hope he murdered, teaching mortals that their supposed protectors could become their greatest threats. But that tale belongs to a later age.